What's up, guys? It's KB. Make sure you subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel. Click the bell icon down below so you don't miss a single video from us. And thanks for tuning in to another video from Underground Sports Philadelphia. Now let's get into it.
Philadelphia, baby, you're gonna love it. Best sports fans in the world. Actually, the worst, but that's what makes them the best.
Welcome back to Top Bins, the show, bringing you all the action from England and Italy, Premier League and SerieA. I am your host, Matt, joined by my co-host, Dom. Dom, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just to say, right before we started, I think it's I know you were talking about yourself saying you were ready, but if we're saying we're ready, isn't it siamo pronti?
Siamo pronti.
Siamo pronti. I'm good, man. I'm good. The only thing that's pissing me off right now is this inflation. I went to Moe's today, and listen, anybody who knows us, right? Matt and I, Moe's has a special place in our heart, all right? And
very true.
Dude, I went and ordered, I did the same order that I normally do, but I did not get queso on the side. I did not make it a full meal.
Was this a chicken stack?
No, just regular burrito. I get queso inside the burrito. I normally do double meat.
Pause.
Nothing extra, nothing else other than the queso that's extra, right, bro? So last time I went to Moe's and did this, I swear that it was like no more than like $14, $15, right, bro? Tell me why my meal was $22.
Did you make it a meal? Did you make it a meal?
No.
They might have
meal.
They might have rung you up wrong, to be totally honest. But yeah, it's not cheap to be eating out like that anymore. Like that kind of thing. If you're gonna be eating out, you got to be going to like somewhere nice. But even then,
dude,
no, it can be tough. I will give a plug to a local place that still hooks it up with a lot of good food. Wildflower. That is the place to go. You will eat very well there for like pretty reasonable. Yeah, but shout out to Moe's. That was. I gotta say. No one cares about this, but we were early on the Moe's game. I'll just say that.
So early.
We were very early on the Moe's game.
We were on the Moe's game when Chipotle was in its heyday.
I had not even heard of Chipotle when we started going to Moe's. That was not even on my radar at all. I don't even know how established Chipotle was. I'm just saying. That Moe's opened up and we were there early on. That's all. That's
instant.
That's all I know. That's all, and that's all, mommy.
How are you, man?
I am doing pretty well. We have I think, this is a fun episode. We did this last year. We did 5 players from each leagues, I guess would be the better way to say that. Because every year when you're, a fan and there's all these transfer targets and players that might be moving, that do end up moving, you hear them, on podcasts or on TV if you listen to, and you see them on your Twitter timeline, and these guys are moving, and it can be hard, especially if you're just a fan of one team and that's the team that you watch for the most part. You're not as aware of other players and other teams and the kind of ins and outs as much as you are of your own team and your own players. You have a much better understanding of their strengths and weaknesses, stuff like that. So we wanted to last year kind of give you just an idea of these names you're going to be hearing and just give you a little bit about these players, why they might be getting transferred, what's so interesting about them. So you at least have a little bit of information when you see them, and we're going to do that again for you this summer. We're starting in England, and we got a good list of names here. A few of these names you've definitely heard over the course of the season. I would say a few of them maybe a little more under the radar for you, for the average fan. We're going to start, I think, with perhaps the most under the radar of the bunch, and that is Levi Colwill. Now, he plays for perhaps the biggest club on this list, but he is He technically is a Chelsea player, although he was on loan at Brighton this past season. If you don't know anything about Levi Colwill, he is a center back. He's just 20 years old, which is impressive to be playing at the top flight as a defender at that age, and to be playing at a pretty good level like he was. This is a guy that this was really his first established season playing at the top level. He had a really good run in the championship for Huddersfield a few years ago, until this past year was really the first time that we got to see him actually show off his potential. The thing now with him is that Brighton want to buy him from Chelsea, but Chelsea are perhaps interested in retaining him. You're going to be hearing his name, I'm sure, over the course of the summer until that gets sorted out. What makes Levi Colwill so special? Well, he is kind of the model, modern defender, what you want out of a center back, and that he's very comfortable in possession. In fact, I would say he's very, very good in possession, has some elite passing skills, great pass selection, and great passing accuracy. And he's very comfortable on the ball. He's very comfortable dribbling with the ball. These are all things that the modern coach, modern tactics kind of want you to be able to do as a center back, is to be able to play in position that way. As far as defensive statistics and ability, tackles, shot blocks, all those things are always a little hard to actually register, and a little hard. You have to look a lot at context. This is not a guy that's throwing himself in a ton of shots, and he's not making a ton of tackles. That's also not what he's asked to do a lot of times. But he does have strong physical tools. If you look at just his body, his physical frame, you can see this guy's going to be able to physically dominate opponents. And when you consider that he's 20, he still has room to grow and fill out his physical frame. He's still very good in the air even now. And when he does go in for tackles and makes those clearances, he does have a pretty good rate at that. So there's a lot to like about Levi Colwill. And I really like him. I think I would love to see him at Brighton again, because I think he'd be very successful. And I think, too, if I'm advising Levi Colwill, I would tell him to look at his teammate in Conor Gallagher, who returned to Chelsea after having a pretty impressive loan spell at Crystal Palace, and point that out and say, listen, you could return, but the Euros are next summer, and if you want to make that Euros roster, I do think the best thing for your future, and it does seem like he does want to return to Brighton. He's talked about how he wants to kind of repay their patience and their taking a bet on him, so to speak. So I would like to see him back at Brighton. That seems where he wants to be. And Chelsea seems like a not so stable place for a young player at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like what Milan did with Tomori, right? They took a chance on a kind of outcasted player from the Chelsea academy, and when it works out, you kind of want to make sure that you go after him and go and get him. But I mean, he's been doing it for Brighton. He's been doing it for the England U21s, right? Does he play with the U23s as well?
So he just started training with the senior team. But yeah, he's largely been a U21 player.
But yeah, like you said, like he's not the guy that's going to be super aggressive going into everything. He's more of the positional center back that likes to be in the right place at the right time. He's very good in the air, in the 95th percentile for aerials 1. But yeah, what really stands out is how comfortable he is on the ball. And when he does, make an interception or go into a tackle, it's normally like possession based. Like he's getting the right angles so that when the ball comes off of his foot, it's either staying at his feet or it's going into a space where his teammates are. It's not going back to the other team. It's not one of those 50-50s when it comes off of him. He's very smart with how he approaches his defensive play. I mean, 99th percentile in passes attempted, 92nd percentile for progressive passes, and 88th percentile for progressive carries. He's the modern day center back. Is it 99th percentile for assists versus center backs? It's it's nice when you have somebody like you see a lot of teams nowadays start to build from the back. It's starting to be brought back, that the possession based game, building from the back and moving forward. Football Reference has a crazy comparison with him and Virgil van Dijk, and he's 20. Okay, let's not jump to rash conclusions, but you can see it, right? Virgil's one of those positional guys. Yes, Virgil will be a little more aggressive and go into tackles, but he's one of those guys that's very smart with his positioning, gets in the right place at the right time, can bring the ball forward, very comfortable on the ball. England's got a gem. Brighton has a gem. I wouldn't be surprised to see them bring him back. But he's got to get out of Chelsea. I mean, he's playing for a better team on loan than the team he belongs to. So he's ready to make a move. Do you think it's smart for him to go to big club, or do you think like taking that step to a club that's maybe Europa Conference League or just on the fringe of European competition would be the move for him?
I think Brighton is the perfect place for him. De Zerbi's the right kind of manager too, in that, one of De Zerbi's biggest strengths is playing out of the back. Pep has raved all season about how they're the best team in Europe at building up at the back, and they are very good. And Levi Colwill is a part of that. He kind of came on under De Zerbi, and I think having a full off season with him and then a full season with him. Again, if I'm advising him, the Euros are next summer. You're probably not starting for England, but you can make the roster if you have a strong campaign for England. Like, the center backs are not, I would say it's not likely to start, but you never know either. I would say the only England center back right now that is starting at the Euros next summer, in my mind, is John Stones. Harry Maguire's we'll see what happens maybe this summer with him and any transfers. If he finds a better spot. He's been a guy that is, even when he's not been in his best for his club, has always pretty much started for England, but that could be on, a little bit of shaky ground. But I would say John Stones is the only center back right now that to me is that's starting. Everyone else is kind of up for grabs there, there's good options all across the back line for England. So we'll have to see, but I think Levi Colwill would do well to be at Brighton. It's a good place for him. I think they're a competitive team. They play well. And I think, he'd have a little bit of continuity as well. I don't know that Chelsea's a spot for him. I think there's a lot of turnover in that squad. I think it would be a big challenge. He probably could get minutes there. That would be the one thing, but I still think Brighton might be just the better option for him.
I don't know what his chances are for the England squad come Euros time, because Southgate always just does not respect, the talented younger, up and coming center backs that England has to offer at times. I mean, Tomori's been fighting to try to break out into that squad. He hasn't gotten a chance even after winning the Scudetto 2 years ago with Milan. What makes you think that Southgate's going to take a chance on a 20-year-old in the next Euros after being in the finals the year before?
Because he plays in England.
The Homer stuff, right? Yeah, it's the English football culture is just so weird, man. It's
and you brought up Tomori, and I think it's interesting because Chelsea there's 3 center backs over the last 4 years that Chelsea really could have used. You already mentioned Tomori, Colwill, and Mark Gahey as well at Crystal Palace. These are all 3 guys that I think, Tomori and Gahey have gone away and done well for themselves. Tomori's obviously won a title, like you mentioned, has been a Champions League starter, which has been a level above what Gahey has achieved. But, that's also the club that he's at is not necessarily a team that's going to be fighting for Champions League and fighting for titles, of course. But Mark's looked good there. Colwill has the ability to be that third center back now, too, that kind of moves away. And I think Chelsea would be kind of kicking themselves for losing out on. But they also, listen, they're just the horseshoe team. They constantly have luck. They lose these guys, and another guy will crop up, and then a Saudi prince will buy all the players that they don't want anymore and get their wages off their books, because that's just the way that Chelsea has worked my entire life. So that's Levi Colwill, a little bit about him and his just great on-the-ball play, and I'm looking forward to seeing him play wherever it is next season. Let's look a little bit at Brennan Johnson. This is a guy that we highlighted last year. When we talked about Nottingham Forest when they got promoted. We did a little thing about all the clubs and the teams and the players to focus on those clubs. Brennan Johnson was a guy that we obviously highlighted for Nottingham Forest. He was a big reason why they got promoted. He's an interesting player in that he's kind of one of these guys, and there's more and more of these players recently, I would say, and that don't have a really solidified position. He's a forward that drifts wide. Uses his speed out on the wings to get in behind defenders. Very good, on the break and on the counter, things like that. He's good at picking out a pass in the final third. Good crosser of the ball. One good thing about him, too, is he does have good instincts. A lot of his shots do come from inside the box, which is exactly what you want out of a forward-minded player. I think this is a guy that maybe with a little bit of more maturity, maybe a better system, better team around him, could really start to increase those goal tallies. I do think it's interesting, too, that he's on penalty duties, for Nottingham Forest. And this is a young player. He's 22 years old, just turned 22 as well. This was a season where he was 21 and was taking penalties for his team on a team, too, that brought in a lot of established players. So I think that speaks a lot. And anytime you read a profile of him as well, you hear a lot about his focus, about his work ethic, and that he's just an incredible player to be around. He just has the right mentality. And that's why he was able to be a regular Premier League player at 21 years old, which is not, again,
No.
not a common thing. The numbers themselves are a little underwhelming. He's not a player that kind of leaps off the page when you look at like underlying stats or even just regular counting stats. He had 8 goals and 3 assists in the Premier League this year. Did play in every game, played 38 Premier League games. So certainly durable and certainly a guy you expect to have good energy. But I think right now is sort of just lacking a little bit in the final end product. I think if his next team is going to be a team that sees that potential in him and sees kind of the raw skills. Again, he has that good speed, not a great dribbler at this moment. But again, when you're 21, 22 years old, there's still a few years for you to figure those steps out. What has me more interested than maybe I would normally be about someone like Brennan Johnson is who's trying to sign him.
Yeah.
And that is Brentford. Brentford have been trying to sign him going back to not this past winter, but winter of 21-22 when he was still in the championship. They were trying to sign him. And they're linked again this summer. I don't know what the situation is necessarily going to be with Nottingham as far as letting him go, if that's even a possibility. But when Brentford is interested in you, a team that has always been good about finding those value players, and, this would be a more like high-profile signing for them. This is, Brentford are typically a team that is getting guys that typically you haven't heard of. But you expect are going to come good and be, valuable players for them. The fact that Brentford are interested in him makes me interested in him, like it's almost like a little bit of a stamp of approval.
I think that's the perfect type of team for him to go to, just because, like you said, he's a raw talent, right? So he's not ready, I think, in my opinion, to take a step to a top tier team in the Premier League, but he's ready to play for a second tier team. He and you said it perfectly when you started talking about him. Is he's a tweener, right? He's not the best when compared against like attacking mids and wingers, especially in the passing and dribbling department. But then when you put him up against forwards, he's not producing well enough in the shooting department, right? Against forwards, he has a lot of successful take-ons and carries. He's in the higher percentiles for those. But aside from that, it's not really there. And the thing is, if he wants to be a winger, he needs to be more creative. You see him just popping up in the right place at the right time to finish shots, or he's getting in behind, right? He's using his speed. He's getting in behind, either taking the goalie one-on-one or playing it across and squaring it up for his teammate. So raw is the perfect way to say this. He has to refine his game a little bit. He reminds me a little bit of Rafael Leao in the case of like the pace department, where he's like coming off of that wing. He's more of like a scorer, but when he starts learning how to take those one-on-one situations out wide, when he does drift and become productive with them, I think that's when he takes that next step. And I think, if Ivan Toney didn't have this suspension, I think him going to Brentford and being paired up with him would be great for his development. Regardless, making a step up to a team like that or to a team like Aston Villa or something like that would be really good for him, because he's paired with better players. They're going to ask more out of him, and he can really develop into that top tier talent that people are touting him to be. But I really do think he's really raw. And I think that, he shouldn't take a step up to a top tier team. If so, that could be really detrimental if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think this is maybe a guy similar to like what we said with Osimhen or Scamacca last year, and that another year at Nottingham Forest probably wouldn't be the worst thing for Brennan Johnson.
No, not at all.
But also, I think Brentford would be a good landing spot for him. I think there's minutes for him to play there, and I think it's a good manager. I think it's a good system, a system that would work well for him. So either way, I think Brennan Johnson is going to be someone I'm watching with a lot of intrigue this year. And listen, the goal numbers, again, were not eye-peeling, but he was a crucial part of Nottingham Forest staying up this season. And he's a guy, too, that when he shoots, he gets it on target, which is, listen, that is half the battle. There are a lot of guys that would love if their strikers could just get shots on target.
Yep.
So, you hope that, and Brentford is really the only team that I've seen linked with him. So it kind of feels like maybe it's that, or he's back at Nottingham Forest. But again, I don't know what's going on with Nottingham Forest. They signed so many players last summer. I don't know what their cash flow situation is looking like. If they're really looking to inject any money with a player sale or things like that, they got a pretty rich owner, and when you're in the Premier League for another season, you get that Premier League money. I don't know that they're really hurting for it, but hey, for like 30 million, maybe you move. Maybe again, Brendan Johnson. It's not like he's been overwhelmingly great. Maybe you say 30 million, fine. Take that's cool with us.
No, but staying at Forest isn't that bad though. He could then become work himself into being that guy for their team.
I'm saying from Nottingham Forest perspective, it's maybe sure. We'll take 30 million for him. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not necessarily in love with him to that degree that they're going to turn down a pretty nice transfer fee for him. The next guy is a guy that people have almost certainly heard of.
It's the high profile guy.
He's a high profile guy. I would say this too, though, strangely underrated as well, and I think under discussed. James Maddison. I think when we talk about midfielders in the Premier League, he's a little bit of a throwback in that he's kind of these. We don't get a lot of midfielders that are simply just good in the final third anymore. I think so much of football over the last 4 or 5 years has been about being good at everything, especially in the midfield. You need to be able to do a lot of things to be a top level midfielder now. This is a guy that knows how to score and knows how to play that killer final pass. Every year, 3 teams go down, of course, in England. There's always 1 or 2 players that everyone is after, and a lot of times those players might go to just like a mid-table club or something like that, or the other relegation team. Like James Tarkowski, I think, was like the big prize from Burnley last year that Everton ended up getting, which ultimately, might have been the difference for Everton staying up this year was James Tarkowski. So it worked out for them. But yeah, he's clearly the gem from this year's kind of relegation teams. This is the player that everyone has kind of been circling already, and now with a relegation to Leicester, that certainly lowers their price at least a little bit. But he's someone that people are familiar with, but I don't know how familiar, and I don't know that people quite realize that he's been a guy that he had 10 goals this past season in the Premier League, 12 last season, 8 assists last year, and 9 assists in this most previous year. Like, he's put up like double-digit high teens goal and assist ratios in the last few years. And he has this reputation as well for being like injury prone. That hasn't been like the full story with him. I think that's been maybe a little unfair. He only played 30 games this past season. He did obviously miss some time, but I do think it's a little Dybala-esque in that Dybala always gets like labeled with being injury prone, and I'm just not totally sure that that's true all the time. And he's a guy too that I think when he's on the field is making a big difference for you. We've all seen his amazing free kicks. He's great on set pieces too and setting up others. He's a guy, again, when I talk about a little bit of throwback too, you don't see a lot of midfielders or really anyone going for the 25-yard curlers anymore. James Maddison is not afraid of that, and he will put 2 away every year, and pretty convincingly.
It's funny because him and Dybala are almost of the same mold, right? If they play in the midfield, they're more of that attacking-minded number 10. They don't really get back much. They can play false 9. But they both have a flair for the dramatic, right? They are not afraid to take on a player and on the dribble. They're not afraid to play that risky pass. They're not afraid, like you said, to take the ball and shoot it from 25, 30 yards out. And score too. It's not like they're just shooting it and you're not getting any production out of it. They're scoring. He can take free kicks. You mentioned that. That was the one thing that I was going to talk about. When you look at these numbers per 90, when you put it against other number 10s and wingers, he's very productive. The 88th or the 80s or higher percentile for shot totals, assists, expected assists, shot creation, progressive passes. But then when you put him up against just all midfielders, that's where he really looks productive in the attacking sense, right? 99th percentile in non-penalty goals, expected goals, shots, assists, progressive carries, successful take-ons, progressive passes received. He's very good at finding his teammates and making sure the ball gets to their foot. So a team that's looking for a number 10, a team that's looking for maybe somebody, if they have really good attacking wingers and they want to, have a player that can kind of play in between. Maybe they don't have a striker, kind of like, what Man City used to be pre-Holland, right? Where you have that number 9, but he's not really a 9, and you kind of fill him in, but your wingers are so good that you can get a player in there to spray passes and play these guys through. And then once that pushes the defense back, he kind of fills in that space, can get the ball and score himself. He's got it. He's really got it, and he's creative. That's one of the major things. If you play that kind of position and you play that kind of role, you have to be creative. I find it funny. I want to know what you think about this one. When you're looking at the similar players, all the way at the bottom of this list, I don't know if you're looking at the page right now, but they have Neymar listed here. Now, listen.
I think that's when you compare them as attacking mids.
You're looking at the stats.
Wingers.
Yeah, you're looking at the stats
Right.
more than the actual eye test, because Neymar is way more flashy. Even though once Neymar moved into Europe and he started doing that, he was a little less flashy and focused more on being productive, doing the things that, would really, help the team out more than go viral on the internet. But I could see it. But
if you look at his comparison on FBref for midfielders, the top 2 are pretty nice. If you're
those are very nice. Those are very nice.
It's Martin Odegaard and Kevin De Bruyne. I will say this: if you're talking about the weaknesses, maybe of James Maddison, and I think maybe some of the apprehension is that I'm not totally convinced about his off-ball work rate. I'm not totally convinced about his defensive ability. And we talked about Mason Mount last week. I think he's actually a little similar to Mason Mount in that he's much more of a complementary player than he is a Martin Odegaard or Kevin De Bruyne, and that they are like a central cog to your team and how it functions. I'm not totally sure that James Maddison is that at the next level. He is for Leicester. I'm not sure, even at Spurs or Newcastle, which are not at the level, say, of Arsenal and Manchester City, right? I'm just not sure that he's that level of player, and he's 26 now too. It's not like he's young. He's going to grow in this role. He certainly still could have his best days ahead of him, but I'm not totally sure that he's not your do it all type of midfielder. I'm not sure that he's not playing a deeper role necessarily. He is a little bit of a luxury, I think, for some teams.
A lot of the best teams these days do a full team press as soon as they lose the ball, right? As soon as they lose the ball, they're up, they're pressing, and they're trying to win the ball back as soon as possible. I don't know if you're going to get that with him. I don't know. That's something that separates Odegaard and De Bruyne from James Maddison, right? Odegaard, De Bruyne, these are the types of guys that when their team loses the ball in the final third, they're finding the closest guy, they're pressing, getting into the passing lanes and making sure that they're winning the ball back. And then they play that key pass that can set them up for a goal. So like you said, he's getting into his later 20s. Yeah, you don't know if there's much room for development or change of style of play. It would have to be the right fit. But this is one of those guys that has been, rumored the last few seasons to make a move from Leicester. And I think that them being relegated is the perfect setup. I don't think that he's a championship caliber player. He's a Prem caliber player. I just don't know where I could see him. I think this is another one of those guys that, it doesn't break into a top 5 team. I think that he's that next tier below.
The 2 teams that have been linked with him the most so far this summer are Newcastle and Spurs, which I think are suitable spots for him in that both teams are trying to break into the top. Newcastle already did this, of course. They're going to be in the Champions League next year. I do think he's a player that can play at the Champions League level. And that would make sense, I think, for Newcastle's midfield as well. I think they can have a James Maddison in that midfield, and that would work pretty nice. I'm not down on him. I just think that's a concern of mine if I'm spending money on James Maddison. But again, you're going to be spending $50 million on an established, English product. He can, he hasn't always been an English international. He hasn't always made the England national team because that position is, attacking and midfield options for England are pretty hard to break through, but he's a good player. I think he can be considered a little bit of a luxury, but he does have great goal scoring instincts and ability. and has like kind of highlight and kind of play always within him. And I think that is a real thing that you can add to your team, which is very beneficial. Let's move on to a little bit more of the industrious side. Another guy that you've certainly heard of over the last year in Moises Caicedo, a midfielder currently playing for Brighton. We'll see what happens this summer. It does seem like he will be moving on no matter what. It seems likely he'll be on a different team. Only 21 years old. Just about everyone in England, I think, would love to have Caicedo. I'm sure there are teams even outside of England that would love to be able to spend £80 million or whatever it's going to cost to pry him away from Brighton. Interesting midfielder. He played, Brighton played a lot as like a double pivot a lot. They would play like a 4-4-2 or something like that, and McAllister would be next to him. Definitely played the more defensive-minded role of the two. This is a guy that if you just look at defensive numbers for midfielders, just cleans up everywhere across the board. He's just one of the top within the Premier League in terms of interceptions, of tackles made. So Caicedo's defensive numbers, only João Paulinho, who played for Fulham, who was also amazing and is getting a lot of praise. He was almost another person on this list, Paulinho, because of how good he was his last year for Fulham. But only Paulinho made more tackles than him in the league last season. And only Declan Rice made more interceptions than Caicedo last year. So even if you're just looking at the raw defensive numbers, this is a guy that has gone in and made the big plays and has the ability to be very disruptive defensively, which is a really big skill and a really big benefit to whatever team gets him. It's not just that, though, that I think has people really excited. It's not just the fact that he can win so much defensively and it's going to break up the attacks for you. It's that he has a very quick mind and he's very quick to turn those interceptions into opportunities for your team. He's one of the best in the league at the winning tackle being made in the final third being turned into a shot creating action or an opportunity for his team. And that is a big benefit as well. He seems, I'm not going to call him press resistant, but he's a player that can resist a press. And it's important to remember he's 21 years old. This is a player that certainly has more room to grow. The physical profile isn't amazing. He's not one of these like lighthouse type of sweeper midfielders that you get sometimes that is big and hulking. He's a little bit more on like the trim side. He's a little slimmer. He's physical, but not in an overly physical kind of way. Which again is not necessarily a bad thing. He doesn't have to be. He could be an N'Golo Kante replacement for Chelsea, who was not an imperious looking man, but was able to find himself in the right position so often is what made him so good. And Caicedo has a lot of those same traits.
I think that's a good comparison to more recent players that have been playing in the Prem. I missed a lot of what you said. I think I got kicked out or like I lagged out for a second and I came back in. So I apologize to the listeners if I repeat something that you said. But the thing that stood out to me is his work rate. He is just all over the place. He doesn't stop. He just keeps working hard. He's not afraid to even go to ground for a slide tackle. He's very, very efficient in his challenges. And he's not afraid to get physical, even though he's not a physically imposing player. Do you know who I was reminded of when watching him, though? This will be a callback from like the early 2010s. Is Ramirez, the Brazilian center midfielder from Chelsea. He reminds me a lot of him. Not the most physically imposing guy, but he's going to work. He's going to get into the dirty areas. He'll win a tackle. He'll spray some passes. He'll press up, right? Like you just said, and win a tackle that can create a chance. I think he's of that mold of what a lot of top teams want from these more defensive guys. And a lot of people are playing double pivots now. So he slots right into a lot of teams. They're going to have to pay a pretty penny for him, but definitely, again, one of the hotter transfer targets coming out of the Prem this summer.
Yeah, and he has a good aerial duel rate as well. Again, for someone that doesn't look as physically impressive as maybe some other holding midfielders do, He does win a lot of aerial duels, and it is not afraid of stepping into those challenges, which I think would be a benefit to whatever team ends up with him. There are two teams that are really interested in him and have been chasing him. That's Arsenal and Chelsea. It does seem like it might be one of those two that ends up with him, although Arsenal are apparently very interested in Romeo Lavia, which could kind of open the door for Chelsea. We'll have to see, and obviously now with N'Golo Kante leaving, if you have Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez in the midfield, that's
you're set for a long time.
Well, we say that all the time, but who knows? Well, with Chelsea, yes, because they're signing like 9-year contracts. So,
that's what I mean.
I do think that would be, we talked about Chelsea and what their future looked like, and that they were still like needed another midfielder. Well, if Caicedo's the other midfielder that you get, okay. But I mean, again, how much money do they have to spend to get to that point?
Galaxy brain, though. Why would he downgrade?
It's the Levi Colwill situation, honestly. You could be playing for Europe for Brighton, but you could go to Chelsea, I guess, and make $300,000 a week. You choose. He did say he has I think it's 12 siblings or something that he sends money to or whatever, and that was like a big thing for why he wanted to leave Brighton in the winter after the World Cup. So maybe Chelsea is the move to help feed all his.
I'm curious what the conversion rate to from pounds to whatever the currency.
He's
in
from Ecuador,
is.
so
Yeah,
I don't know what is the Ecuadorian.
Yeah, I don't want to call it something and be wrong. So
the currency is the United States dollar.
Really?
Yeah. But I think that also has like pesos. Pesos are like really common in all of like South and Latin America. The more I read about this, the more I'm getting a little confused. Ecuador uses the US dollar as their currency. So shout out to
at the same value as the regular US dollar, I'd assume then, right? Like is a dollar worth more in Ecuador? Or is
I'm
it worth
sure
more
the
here?
dollar it's probably like how like the buying power of a dollar is probably like better in Ecuador. Like I'm sure like if you went down there with $10, that'd be very different than you going around America with $10. Like you probably, I'm not gonna pretend like I know the economic situation of Ecuador off the back of my head, but I was surprised to learn that they use the US dollar because this happened in 2000 after their own currency, the sucre, took a nosedive due to a financial crisis.
Tough.
Yeah, and it was long before the government acknowledged U.S. dollars as the official currency. So, yeah, it's easy to visit if you're an American tourist because there's no currency exchange.
It's nice.
So, there you go. Maybe we'll go to Ecuador. Maybe that's. There was a great song, "Ecuador is Lovely This Time of Year," that from my youth. So maybe it's destiny that I end up in Ecuador one day. Jack Harrison as our last player on our highlight list for this week for England. This is another guy similar to James Maddison in that he's going to be circled because he is currently a Leeds player. Remains to be seen if he will remain to be a Leeds player. 26 years old, a winger, forward, attacking mid. Again, similar to almost like Brendan Johnson and that no like real established position. Has worked best as kind of a free-floating 10 in that 4-2-3-1 at Leeds, or even at times as a 4-3-3, playing on the wing, but being allowed the space to kind of overlap or cut in. So whatever team gets him, I think would be best to kind of work to his strengths. Never been like a huge output guy, but he's had pretty decent numbers every Premier League season that he's had. His first season with Leeds in the 2021 season, he had 8 goals and 8 assists. The following season, 8 goals and 1 assist, and this past season, he had 5 goals and 7 assists. Those are good numbers for like a starting like mid-table, bottom table. Of course, obviously, Leeds getting relegated, but decent numbers for that level of starting player on a team like that. This is not a guy that's going to be like going to like one of these top clubs, I don't think, and making a huge impact. I think his days of being a Manchester City pipeline product are behind him. But we have seen guys like this can provide a lot of value to a team that again might be looking at relegation next year and thinking Jack Harrison could get us over the line. He's been linked with a team like Everton, which I think could use someone like Jack Harrison because I think he would play to a lot of the strengths there. He's a great crosser. I think that's something that is that's really interesting about him is you don't see that a lot from wingers anymore. He's sort of a classic take it to the line and whip it in, but he's very smart, finds the right pass a lot and has a tendency to really whip in some dangerous balls. And we've seen him have big like goal scoring outbreaks too. Like this is a guy that can get you a brace in a game and he can be a match winner. Like he certainly has that ability. I think there's a lot to like about him. Also great pressing forward. If he played for Bielsa, if he played under Jesse Marsh, he grew up in the Red Bull system, in his like teenage years, and then was with Manchester City. Like this is a guy that tactically understands the game that I think can be very flexible, but again, it's probably going to be best used as some sort of pressing forward guy that can win possession for you. I think a bottom half club would be very happy with Jack Harrison next season.
Another guy with a flair for the dramatic. He can score a really impressive goal. He can put a cross in, but I'm not convinced that his service is top tier. You know what I mean? Like he definitely has the mindset and the desire to play these dangerous balls across when he's out on the wing, but I don't see too many converted. I don't see the quality as what you can see from some of these other wingers in the Prem. He's another guy that can play centrally as a number 10, but can also play out wide. I didn't know that he played Division I NCAA soccer here in the United States. He got his career started by being drafted by the Chicago Fire after playing in the Wake Forest system. So that's cool. U.S. He's English, obviously, but kind of like a U.S. system product. Making his way to the Premier League. Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I don't think that he's a player that makes a move to a top half table team, but more like a mid table to a lower half team. But definitely someone that I think shouldn't be playing for Leeds in the Championship. I think that he is a Premier League caliber player. I just don't know where. He's another one of those players like for Leeds where they're going to have to offload a couple people if they want to try to stay alive and make it back to the Prem. So, guys like him and Yonto, who are kind of the same mold, but kind of play on the two different sides of the field. He's definitely going to be leaving. I don't know where. Maybe Forrest picks him up, but
another to the collection, shall we? Yeah, the two teams that I found that have been interested in him, again, according to the rumors, right? It's who really knows, but Everton and West Ham, which I think both those places make a lot of sense for him. West Ham would obviously probably be the better option.
I can see him at West Ham.
But West Ham would be a good option. They've lost some attacking players, and I think would fit in pretty well there. And Everton, again, he would provide a really good spark for them. I think he would immediately come in and, again, has a good crossing ability. We'll see what he feels like a player that Sean Dyche could do a lot of good with. And, I think it would be a good stepping stone for Everton.
Well, yeah, considering that Everton is already selling some players, I think they just sold Onana, or they reached an agreement to sell Onana, and Anthony Gordon isn't there anymore, and they need some talent. And they're getting the funds by selling a couple players. Maybe Harrison's the guy to bring in and try to bring Everton back to the mid-table team that I've always seen them as. I know that you wouldn't agree with that. You wouldn't, you just want to see Everton suffer. But
I don't think they're selling Onana. I think
I could have sworn that I saw something that a deal was or an agreement, at least between the player and the club, were.
I would be surprised because he's a very important piece of their midfield.
He's one of their best players.
Yeah, I don't think. I think it would be very stupid if they sold him. But we'll see. I don't know where he would end up either because he's the type of player. And they just bought him last summer for a pretty decent fee. I would be surprised to see who goes in for him because they certainly want to make their money back at the very least. And I don't know that he's as worth it to someone else as he is to Everton. right now. But we'll keep our eyes on it. You never know. Could happen. Speaking of transfers and transfer dealings and confirmed and unconfirmed, sources say all that good stuff. You should look very shocked at something that just came up on your screen. Did you just find out that you have a Nigerian cousin who?
Yeah. No, I just went on Fabrizio Romano's Twitter page, and the first thing I saw, I did not know about. So this is kind of crazy. Since we're talking,
don't leave us in suspense.
Since we're talking about transfer roundup, right? Ilkay Gundogan to Barcelona.
Oh yeah, that has been. I mean, I'll be honest, Tom. That has been a poorly kept secret for like.
Listen, my Twitter for you feed is filled with right-wing propaganda and
because you have
Milan
done that to yourself.
And Milan transfer rumors. That's all I see.
Important to say, it's filled with that because you reply to make fun of those people.
I'm a reply troll. Yes, I'm a reply troll.
Guys, I just want to make it clear that
to all the listeners, let's make that clear. I am a reply troll. I like answering with reasoning and logic and kind of some tongue-in-cheek responses every now and then. But no, I am not just like creeping on the pages, giving them favorites and retweeting and stuff.
I love you debating fascists in the free market of ideas. That's always a winning strategy, Tom. Let's talk about the transfers, shall we? Mateo Kovacic, 2 minutes said he's speaking of Ilkay Gundogan. Here's his replacement, another great ball-carrying, press-resistant midfielder. Kai Havertz to Arsenal. This was in the works last week, and it seems like it's incredibly advanced today. It seems like maybe by the time people have been listening to this, it is much more confirmed. But it does seem like that is happening. I mean, I got to say.
This could be the step to revive his career, man.
Certainly could.
Oh.
I'm waiting with bated breath. I just have not seen consistent performance out of Havertz to think that this is like, wow, amazing. But who knows? I think Chelsea's been a bad place for a lot of people, and a change of scenery could really help.
It's competition for guys that play up top at Arsenal already, like Gavi Jesus. It's squad rotation.
Dom, they're not spending $60 million on Kai Havertz as a rotational player. He is starting. I have no clue what that is.
And this is the thing. He's the kind of mold that fits them. Yeah, I mentioned earlier when you have a team that has wingers that are prolific scorers, right? They've got Saka and Martinelli. Havertz is the kind of guy that you play it into him and he can release the wingers down, not making it solely on Odegaard or your Jorginho or whoever their third midfielder is, because I don't know if it's Declan Rice. There's new stuff that we're going to talk about in the transfer saga that is Declan Rice leaving West Ham. But whoever their third midfielder is, Havertz can kind of work with them. I think it's a cheeky signing that can really, really work for them.
We will find out. Cheeky is not the word I would use. I would say it's gaudy and a little luxury to me. Tom, how about this one? I've been waiting on you. The look at it, the tonal shift, the tenor of the conversation has changed. Sandro Tonali to Newcastle, reported fee of 70 million euros.
The first guy I ever saw on Twitter report this, I called a hack. And now we're seeing like the big guys, the certified guys saying the same thing now. And it's almost like finalized. I can't believe this one, man. And they were going to do 60 million. I think Milan said no to that. Like apparently the club has agreed with the player on terms, but not with Milan on the fee. Milan want I think 70, or they upped it to 80 mil or something like that. I think he's worth 100 mil or more, but I understand that Milan need money to bring in players, but I don't think that selling Tonali is the right thing for them to do. This is a guy that took a pay cut to play for you. This is a guy that bleeds the badge.
Unless he is the one that wants to leave. This reeks very much of he is the one that wants to leave and not Milan are just selling him off. I'll say this. I will speak in defense. I will play the devil's advocate here of Milan. And I know that everyone is talking poorly about Cardinale. I'm not going to say that they don't deserve some blame for the situation that they find themselves in, and that everyone is upset that they got rid of Maldini. I will simply say this, though. I don't think they're wrong when they discuss that Maldini did mess up a lot of transfer deals by letting people walk out the door. And we've talked about this.
Yes.
They let over like $100 million in player value leave with Donnarumma, right? That's big stuff. You know, they've let guys walk. They let Çalhanoğlu walk. That's money that you could have got for him.
And it's crazy because you couldn't convince Kessie, Hakan, or Donnarumma to stay and be like, hey, see this thing through. We're going to win a title. You know what I mean?
If I'm an owner,
or
it makes
sell
sense
them
that
like
I'm
a year
annoyed with
prior if you don't see that. Yes, and I understand that, and I do agree with that. And you know, everybody's kind of harped on, you know, the most recent transfers, right, for this last season, and everybody that's been brought in and hasn't been used well, and you know, it's become this discourse of, you know, is it the sporting director? Is it the owner of the team? Is it the team manager? Like, who's at fault for this kind of deal, right? But when you bring up points like that, it's a little more solidified as to, you know, kind of parting ways and kind of looking at this whole thing full circle instead of just the recency bias. Maldini
is not blameless, and people act like he's some great martyr, and he really isn't. Like, you know, he's not been perfect.
A lot of Milan fans, myself included, are blinded by the love for the club and the love for club legends. Like, I get that, and guys that do, and guys that
it's a terrible optics thing.
Yes,
like.
It's the same thing like with Tonali, right? I'm talking, you know, we're talking about a guy that did all this stuff to play for Milan. It's his boyhood club type deal. But like now he's deciding, hey, I want to go play for Newcastle. Well, he's going to make double his salary. Like I don't blame him for wanting to make that move. You know, at the end of the day, you got to do what's right for you and your family. I don't distrust Maldini's replacement. Moncada is a wonderful sporting director. You've seen what he's done at Roma. So like, I trust him, right? It's just, how are they going to navigate this? They have to use this money and bring somebody in. I've seen some of the replacement rumors like Cyprian Thuram, which I would not be opposed to whatsoever. But
Sorry, Chief.
They ain't got the money. They ain't got the money for it if they're competing with clubs like Liverpool and some of the top Prem teams, because they're going to shell out the big bucks, and you know, we'll probably lose out on that. But there have been other ones. You know, obviously there's that ongoing Ruben Loftus-Cheek, you know, saga, but I don't think that's a proper replacement for a guy like Tonali. I don't know. It's with Milan, it's always, you have to take it one day at a time and not look too much into it. They're going to be rumored to be interested and all these other words that are used, you know, that to make it seem like it's a done deal or a sure thing, but it's not. And at the end of the transfer window, all of these guys go to other teams. So
I'm going to stop you from spiraling because you are, and I get it, but it's going to be okay.
Oh, it's a good thing. It's a good thing I bought a Leao jersey instead of a Tonali jersey, because I was like this close to getting a Tonali jersey.
I'll just say, Tonali's a good midfielder. He's not. I don't think getting $60 million for him is the worst thing. I'll just say that. I don't think he's that great. That's all I'll say. He's a good midfielder.
Fair enough.
I don't think he's like, this Milan team is collapsing without him. It is the last word on it. Bennett being out for like a part of next season with that injury, and now no Tonali.
But they need to sign somebody.
The midfield was already thin. I do wonder, you know, they're going to have to make some decisions in this summer. But a lot of Italian clubs are.
Yeah.
Speaking of another Milan club that is losing a valuable boy that I love, Robin Gosens going to Union Berlin, leaving Inter. I love this for Berlin, personally. I'm planning on potentially being in Berlin next summer, so I might have to go to a Berlin store and get a Robin Gosens jersey.
They're on the up and up. I mean, this is a team that's shot up in the Bundesliga since they've come up from the second division. Like they have been doing the right things, and it's one of the only clubs still operating with a manual scoreboard. which is pretty cool.
Thank you for that fact, Tom. I really appreciate it. It's a good signing for Berlin. I was always a little disappointed it didn't work out for him at Inter. He did deal with some injury problems, and I think that didn't help, and he never really seemed to get settled there. Was never really able to replicate what we saw from him at Atalanta, which is where I loved watching him play there. One of my favorite wingbacks to watch in all of Europe. I hope he can recapture that form, and maybe Berlin is the place for him to do that. It's a team that is certainly going to utilize him to his strengths in that way. So a little sad we never got to see it for Inter. I'm sure you're not, but we'll likely see it for Berlin. Dom, the Declan Rice saga has taken a turn. It seemed like Arsenal were going to be the destination. It was just kind of a matter of the price, what it's looking like, how it's gonna shake out, all the fees agreed. A new player has entered the arena. Manchester City are also apparently interested in Declan Rice.
Big surprise there. Right?
I gotta tell you, if there's weight to that, I'm a little nervous if I'm Arsenal because they certainly have a bigger pool. They certainly don't have any issue spending the money. And what felt like maybe a few weeks ago, like he's going to be an Arsenal player, is maybe I'm not sure that he is. I feel much less confident about that. I did see, and there's no way this is true, but there was a proposed deal, and again, not true, but it is fun to think about. Declan Rice going to Manchester City and Calvin Phillips being part of the deal and going to West Ham. Calvin Phillips, as we know, played like 2 games for Manchester City this year. A bizarre transfer because Leeds really could have used Calvin Phillips this past season, but not going to happen, of course. But it does, the longer this goes on, the more interesting it gets. Thomas Partey seems to be leaving Arsenal for Saudi Arabia. It looks like they're just hoovering up everyone's either aging player that isn't worth it anymore, or they're problematic players that they don't want to. Again, no one has acknowledged the Thomas Partey situation all year at Arsenal.
Hey, listen, he goes to Saudi Arabia. It's a little more acceptable, right? So,
I think it's actually less acceptable in Saudi Arabia. I don't know if you know the crimes for his proposed alleged crime.
Well, yeah, he gets something chopped off probably. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, it's not jail time. It's dead time. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But Declan Rice. It seems like maybe we could be in a little tug of war between Manchester City and Arsenal on that front. Which
not for anything. I watched what was it? It was a random video. This is just some stupid speculation stuff. But there was a video that was on YouTube. It was like I don't know if it was on West Ham's channel or not, but it was like of Declan Rice in his house, kind of giving like a tour of his game room, talking about in his game room in his house, he has every jersey that he's received from any other player like framed. But guess who was the guest on this thing? Yaya Toure. And he had all this love for Yaya, and it was one of his most prized possessions was the Manchester City Yaya jersey. And he's talking about City and how like when he played against City, like it was so great, and meeting Yaya was like this huge, life, changing experience type deal. So he's got some love for City there. So the allure of City, the fact that they won the league again, that type of pool, knowing that some of these other midfielders, like you said, Calvin Phillips, not giving exactly what City wanted. I think it could be a move. It could be a move. It's not something to sleep on. Arsenal seemed like it was a done deal. Not anymore. No. City's not just swooping in and taking the league from you. They're also taking all your transfer targets. So that's tough. That's tough.
Hey, you know what? City, I will say that City are pretty firm with their prices. We saw this with like Cucurella. If it goes beyond what their valuation of the player is, they're fine with walking away from the deal and moving on. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Dom, that's it. That's all we got. Anything to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, a couple other just quick ones. PSG wants to activate Xavi Simon's buyback clause. It's only $6 million, which is like friggin' pennies to them, but the player has to agree. Seems like he's enjoying his time in the Eredivisie, but he's one of those players that definitely will see himself at a big club soon. Bernardo Silva is still not making his mind. PSG interested, Saudi clubs interested. Barca probably can't sign him.
If he goes to
financial
Saudi
fair
Arabia,
play.
it is Jover. It is absolutely Jover.
Kim Min Jae, completing military service in South Korea, so no movement on his thing yet. Bayern, it looks like he's headed to Bayern. Who
Yes.
knows?
Bayern are just going to buy a center back every summer.
One thing I will say is this guy from Fenerbahce, Arda Güler, big young talent out of Turkey. It seems like Milan have been in advanced talks, but who knows what that means. PSG are also interested in him. So Fenerbahce want to keep him, but he seems like a player that's ready to make a move. Also, Marcus Thuram looking like he's going to AC Milan. Milan pushing for that move, but who knows? I can't ever trust anything, even if Fabrizio Romano says it, So, yeah, this is the time. I love this time. As a neutral looking at other teams and where players will end up. Get your bingo cards out, because I'm a FIFA player. I love seeing where players end up going. As a Milan fan, it pulls at my heartstrings. So, yeah, man. Summertime. It's fun. It's a fun time. I think that's all I have.
That's all we got. We'll be back next week. We'll be doing the same thing, but with 5 players from SerieA. I can already tell you,
guys.
There's a guy on there that's going to be on the list that I've already decided. We've already talked about this year very briefly because of some of the goals he scored this season, been linked to some English clubs as well, so we could have a little interleague transfer there for the podcast at least. But we'll be back breaking down 5 players that you'll almost certainly be hearing about that could be on the move this summer from SerieA. Until then, though, I hope you enjoy what is left of the international break. Enjoy your summer. Enjoy the weather. I hope it's nicer wherever you are than it is where we are. But until then, we will talk to you next time. See ya.